Buster Keaton, after making 14 short comedies with his mentor and friend, Roscoe Arbuckle, started his independent screen career with the feature film The Saphead, an adaptation of the Broadway hit The New Henrietta. The title role of Bertie Van Alstyne, the spoiled millionaire's son, helped to establish him as a real movie star, but the film had another unforeseen consequence. It allowed Buster to taste the opportunities provided by the feature-length format. After finishing his work on The Saphead, Keaton, who was only 24 years old at the time, immediately tried to convince his producer and investor, Joseph Schenck, to give him the means to create his own feature-length slapstick comedies, arguing that the brevity of the short film format severely limited plot possibilities.
In a two-reeler, there is only enough film for gags, while in a 5,000-foot feature, there is film enough to provide a real story. And after all, folks like to see a plot worked out naturally along with fun-making.
At the beginning of the 1920s, the only feature slapstick comedy was Mack Sennett's Tilly's Punctured Romance, starring Charlie Chaplin, Mabel Normand, and Marie Dressler. Both Chaplin and Lloyd continued to work within the limits of the short film format, so it's no wonder that Schenck refused to risk fulfilling his protégé's wishes. Buster started making his own feature films only 3 full years and 19 two-reelers later, when Chaplin's and Lloyd's first features had already been released. Keaton always considered this delay a missed opportunity that damaged his film career. But even when Keaton eventually started work on Three Ages, he approached the project with caution, probably at Schenck's insistence. The movie was deliberately composed of 3 interconnected short narratives, able to be cut and shown separately if that became a commercial necessity. By its idea and structure, the film was conceived as a loose parody of David Wark Griffith's Intolerance. In that monumental creation, 4 parallel times, ancient Judea, Babylon, France in 1572, and modernity, were used to demonstrate how intolerance and enmity have poisoned human existence for centuries. Keaton took 3 ages instead of 4. The Stone Age, ancient Rome, and modernity again, and following his hero's journey to the heart of his beloved in each one, demonstrated how love has poisoned human existence throughout history just as much. Preparation for Three Ages began in September 1922, right after Keaton completed his last short, The Balloonatic. When Buster came back from a New York vacation, he started shooting the film on January 11th and ended on March 20th, 1923. As in all of his previous films, Buster directed Three Ages himself, with the help of Keystone veteran Eddie Klein, who controlled the filming whenever Buster was in front of the camera. By the time Keaton started working on the film, he had 4 writers on his staff, but Clyde Bruckman, for example, recalled that he was often ashamed to take the money, much less the credit, because the gags and stories were 90% Buster's. Buster, however, always valued his gang. He wouldn't have anyone to play baseball with without them, and immortalized their names in this inside joke in a displayed roster of football teams. For the first big movie, Keaton wanted Constance Talmadge, his wife's sister, and a star of light comedies to be his leading lady. Not only did he consider her one of the best comedic actresses of that time, but she had also played her first starring role, 2 of them, actually, the Mountain Girl and Marguerite de Navarre, in Griffith's Intolerance, so her presence would make for a great joke in and of itself. But Joe Schenck, who was Constance's producer as well, had other plans. He believed that featuring 2 of his stars in one film would be unprofitable. And this wasn't the only issue. Just as Keaton began working on Three Ages, Schenck became the agent for the winner of an English beauty contest sponsored by the Daily Sketch newspaper. Margaret Leahy, a 20-year-old milliner's assistant, reportedly beat 80,000 other English beauties and won the opportunity to play a second lead role in Norma Talmadge's drama, Within the Law. But when Leahy arrived in Hollywood, it turned out that she was so totally lacking in talent that Frank Lloyd, Norma's director, flatly refused to work with her. Schenck couldn't just send the winner back to England. So he decided that comedy does not require much acting skills from its leading actress. He entrusted the problematic London beauty to Keaton's care, despite Buster's objections. 30 years later, Buster was still shaking his head over the number of simple scenes that had to be thrown in the trash because of Leahy. However, Keaton, who was raised in vaudeville and learned early to make good use of the unexpected, was quite a difficult director for any beginning actor. He strived to only roughly describe what should happen in the scene, expecting his actors to be both independent and creative.
Half of our scenes, for God's sakes, we only just talked over. We didn't actually get out there and rehearse them. We just walked through it and talk about it. And we cranked that first rehearsal, because anything can happen, and generally did. And then we got our best sequences that thing.
Moreover, Keaton endlessly improvised on the set and did new things without warning.
Mr. Keaton may have a sudden idea right in the midst of the scene and will start doing something entirely different from what we had rehearsed. In one scene, we had rehearsed for him to go slowly out of the door, hat in hand, and turn at the door to wave goodbye to me. I was to stand very straight and solemn, angry with him and indignant. Then just as started to go out of the door, he changed his mind. He threw his hat down and came over to me and grabbed me in his arms and kissed me. I hadn't the least idea he was going to do any such thing. I took a chance and just picked up a vase and smashed it on the floor to show how angry I was. "Whatever did you do that for?" I asked Mr. Keaton. "Oh, just had a notion to change the business," he said. "And you got away with it splendidly." But another day I hashed every scene we did because he changed so much and I could not catch on quick enough. But he expects this.
However, despite the difficulties, Margaret called Buster a fine chap and said that everyone on the set was always ready to help her. In addition, Leahy mentioned Keaton's uncompromising perfectionism in staging spectacular scenes.
We do certain scenes 2 or 3 ways before the camera. Then we see them run off in the little projection room and Mr. Keaton finds things wrong with them or gets better ideas, and then we do them over again. There is a scene in which a whole house seems to be burned down, and we have burned it down 3 times now, and still Mr. Keaton is not satisfied. Of course, they build just the front of it working all night, and then we burn it down in the daytime. Mr. Keaton says if he can't get the house to burn down properly, he will cut it out of the picture after all.
Buster could afford such extravagance. Keaton's transition to feature films not only provided him with a slower pace of work, only 2 full-length films a year instead of 8 short ones, but also gave him vastly larger budgets. While his shorts averaged around $20,000, he spent more than 10 times that amount on features. The prehistoric and modern parts, not demanding elaborate sets, were filmed first and almost simultaneously at Keaton's studio on the Metro lot, on the streets of Los Angeles, and in the Chatsworth neighborhood of the San Fernando Valley, where Keaton had filmed Paleface a year before. Buster was even willing to economize on some props. For example, the car of his wealthy rival for the girl's heart, played by the famous Wallace Beery, was Keaton's own beloved and rare Mercer Raceabout. Yet ancient Rome was recreated with the grandeur unprecedented for a comedy and worthy of Griffith himself. Keaton's art director, Fred Gaburi, disguised as a Roman street the recently erected east portico of the unfinished Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum, which later hosted the Olympics in 1932 and 1984. But the main attraction of the picture was a whole new Coliseum, specially built for the filming of the chariot race. The press reported that a 150-feet-high replica of the building was erected, including an arena for several thousand spectators with a 14-foot-high wall. Construction of this set supposedly required 30 carloads of lumber, 3 tons of nails, 8 tons of plaster, 150 carpenters, 50 laborers, and 20 painters. Critics felt then that in size and impressiveness, the set only rivaled by Douglas Fairbanks' blockbuster Robin Hood, released a year earlier. In reality, the actual height of the structure barely exceeded 30 feet. Only the gates, the wall around the arena, and the lower tier where the live audience sat had to be built. Everything above and behind the construction was a detailed miniature, seamlessly attached to real objects in the frame, with tiny spectators, some of whom were slightly animated to add realism. Far more obvious special effects were used in the prehistoric era. Tiny Buster rides into the frame, and into the movie itself, on a dinosaur in the stop-motion animation. According to Clyde Bruckman, the idea of a dinosaur came to Keaton when they needed to come up with a beast that would not be inferior to Beery's mammoth. It referenced the short animated film Gertie the Dinosaur by famous cartoonist Winsor McCay. Keaton had known McCay personally since vaudeville times when they appeared on the same playbill. However, Keaton always tried to minimize the use of special effects when it came to performing his own stunts. Although he replaced himself with a dummy in this cartoonish gag with a catapult, usually he did not spare time and effort, determined not to deceive his audience. For example, he was willing to pole vault onto a balcony on the Rome set 32 times in a row to execute it properly, or to try more than 70 separate takes to shoot the scene of the invention of prehistoric baseball without making cuts. Margaret Leahy recalled that by the end of the workday, Keaton was often covered with bruises, with splotches of iodine on cuts received in doing his stunts. In filming 3 Ages, one of the most spectacular stunts in all of Keaton's filmography resulted from an accident on the set. Running from the cops, Buster climbs onto the roof of a house and wants to jump to the next one about 18 feet away. The rooftop was built over the Broadway tunnel overlooking Los Angeles, so that it seemed to be separated from the ground by a dozen stories. The actual height of the set was about 35 feet, with a safety net positioned below the camera's line. Buster made the leap but fell short, crashing into the opposite wall with his elbows and knees before landing in the net. The injury took him out of action for 3 days, but the team and Keaton liked the filmed incident better than the original idea. So the stunt was further complicated by Buster's falling through the awnings, and even script was rewritten to accommodate it. This episode has always remained Keaton's own favorite from the film. Buster himself considered 3 ages too much burlesque. He had had no chance to develop a real story, which he so aspired to, but he admitted that there was enough laughs to hold up. The absurd and anachronistic gags that anticipated Monty Python's flying circus still work today, though Keaton's love for postmodern references beyond the movie itself made some of his jokes hard to understand without context. For example, the Stone Age part as a whole hinted at both Griffith's man's genesis and Chaplin's his prehistoric past. In both films, ancient men strutted around in furry skins and fought a romantic rival with upgraded primitive weapons. Buster's unimpressive horses in ancient Rome, which in his imagination turn into cartoons with the inscription Sparkplug before the chariot races, is a link to the horse of the same name from Billy DeBeck's wildly popular newspaper comic strip about Barney Google. The race itself, as well as the look of Roman Buster in general, referred the audience to the sensational theatrical production of Ben-Hur, where the chariot race with real horses was arranged directly on stage. The role of Masala was performed by the later famous movie Cowboy and Keaton's favorite object of parody, Bill Hart. Buster's interaction with the defiantly false lion in the Roman prison alludes to Bernard Shaw's popular play based on the parable of Androcles and the lion, and first staged in London in 1913 and on Broadway in 1915. In the story, the runaway slave Androcles pulled a splinter out of a lion's paw, earning his friendship and later the emperor's mercy and freedom. Trapped Buster in the film recalls that when meeting a lion, something needs to be done with its paws but can't remember what exactly. So he offers the lion a manicure. The lion was pleased. The audience and critics of the film were pleased too, although a few critics complained that Buster and other slapstick comedians would be better off sticking to short films. The movie was in general warmly received and praised for its inventiveness, gags, stunts, and scenery. Reviews stated that the picture will secure Keaton's rank as an equal of Chaplin and Harold Lloyd. The premiere at the Warfield Theater in San Francisco was a huge success. At the Palace, the main movie theater in Washington, 3 ages broke the record of 18 months in the whole theater's history, becoming second only to the super popular Four Horsemen with Rudolph Valentino. The movie reportedly earned almost $500,000 on the domestic market, and since Keaton became more popular in Europe than at home, it likely got even more overseas. Buster didn't have to cut the film into shorts. The path to big movies was open for him now, and all the most interesting things were yet to come.